only correction that I would make is that we now have better astronomical measurements due to satellites and computers. And I would suspect the date would be more like 12,000 years ago. But that still makes Tiwanaku the oldest city known on the face of the earth.
In his Chronicles of Peru, written in the 1600s, Garcia de la Vega wrote that when the Spanish first arrived in South America, they asked the Incas who built this incredible city of Tiwanaku. Did you build it? The Incas said, no. In fact, they laughed at the idea. They said, we had nothing to do with it. This was built thousands of years before our time. The current view says that man arrived in South America around 15,000 years ago, a wandering hunter-gatherer. Yet the evidence we've seen suggests that Tiwanaku was designed by an advanced civilization. A chance discovery reveals just how advanced they may have been. While restoring the ancient temple at Pumapunka, Dr. Rivera and his team discovered a long-lost secret of the ancient builders. They found a strange depression between two blocks of stone. Upon clearing out the debris, they noticed the unmistakable glint of metal.
Whoever built Tiwanaku came up with a very ingenious method for holding together the huge stones which they used to build the site. They carved a groove in the edge, and into this groove they would pour a molten alloy, which later hardened into a staple. What I find amazing here is that to move to each site where the staple was needed, they had to have something like a portable smelting plant to maintain this metal in a molten state.
Mysterious metal clamps revealed a level of technology far beyond their time.
The antiquity and the technological sophistication of Tiwanaku should make each and every one of us fully question the origins of civilization.
Where did the ancient Tiwanakans learn this complex process? The answer may lie halfway around the world at one of man's most mysterious monuments, the Great Sphinx of Egypt. Is it possible that there was an advanced civilization on this planet thousands of years before history tells us? Investigative journalist Graham Hancock considers this to be a very real possibility. He has dedicated 9 years of his life to tracking down the evidence.
This monument is one of a category of monuments from all over the world. These monuments have certain things in common. First and foremost, enormous blocks of stone, gigantic, weighing hundreds of tons. Secondly, very precise scientific astronomical alignments. And thirdly, the greatest mystery of all, we don't know who built these monuments.
Hancock points to a number of sites throughout the world which exhibit gigantic stone construction. This is called megalithic architecture. The immense fortress of Sacsayhuaman in Peru is comprised of individual granite stones, some weighing 360 tons. That's the equivalent of 2 diesel locomotives. The Osirian in Egypt is made of tremendous pillars of red Aswan granite, some of which weigh over 100 tons.
My own view is that what we're looking at here is a common influence that touched all of these places long before recorded history began. A remote third-party civilization unidentified by historians that had a presence in Mexico, that had a presence in South America, that had a presence in Egypt and elsewhere, and that left behind a legacy of knowledge in all of those places.
In 1993, an independent Egyptologist, John Anthony West, shocked the world with geological evidence that the Sphinx in Egypt could be 12,000 years old. Recently, astronomer-engineer Robert Bauval, using a computer model of the Giza Plateau, made a startling discovery which seems to confirm this ancient age of the Sphinx.
In very simple terms, the first thing that one realizes when you look at the pyramids of Giza is that they're designed along astronomical principles. We're finding that the astronomy is leading us to conclude that the Sphinx was erected in 10,500 BC. And this matches exactly with the ideas that have been developed in the geological analysis of the Sphinx. So there are two hard sciences now indicating that the Sphinx could be very, very old, and going back to the 11th millennium BC.
According to Graham Hancock, if Tiahuanaco and the Sphinx were both built around 12,000 years ago, they may have had a common source. Consider these similarities between the Americas and Egypt. Both have huge pyramids, precisely aligned to the cardinal points. Temples with megalithic stones, with extremely fine joints of less than a 50th of an inch. Both Egypt and the Americas used royal headdresses of similar style. Both employed a unique style of construction using L-shaped corners. Both used the same style of metal clamps to hold huge stones in place, and both cultures used the process of mummification to preserve and honor their dead. These compelling similarities between Egypt and the Americas suggest to some that a sophisticated group of seafaring people crossed the Atlantic thousands of years before Columbus. A collection of ancient maps suggests they may have had a knowledge of the world which has never been explained.
In 1929, rolled up on a dusty shelf in a library in Constantinople in Turkey, a map was found. This map had been drawn in 1513 by a Turkish admiral, Admiral Piri Reis. The strange thing about this map is it shows features of the Earth that nobody in 1513 should have been able to know.
Before the 18th century, sailors ran the risk of crashing their ships onto rocky coastlines because they lacked one thing, the ability to calculate longitude. For that, you need an extremely accurate clock. It wasn't until 1790 that the first accurate marine timepiece was invented, and sailors could pinpoint their position on the seas. Yet 250 years before this clock was made, Piri Reis had drawn a map which showed the coastlines of Africa and South America within half a degree of longitude.
And as Piri Reis himself told us, that knowledge was not his knowledge. It was knowledge that he'd borrowed and copied from earlier maps. And he stated on the map that it was based on more than 20 source maps, and that some of these maps went back to the time of Alexander the Great, or even earlier, in other words, to before the time of Christ. So the mystery is, where did these source maps come from? Who charted the globe long ages ago with an accuracy that we ourselves can hardly match today?
A professor of science, Charles Hapgood, was combing through the map room of the Library of Congress when he made a startling discovery. As my eyes fell upon the southern hemisphere of a world map drawn by Orontius Phineas in 1532, I had the instant conviction that I had found here a truly authentic map of the real Antarctica.
The mystery of this map is it shows Antarctica as it looks under the ice long before Antarctica is even supposed to have been discovered. And perhaps the greatest mystery of all is that it shows the Antarctic Peninsula not as it looks today, covered by more than a mile of ice, but as it actually looks underneath that covering of ice. Now, we ourselves have only known what the land under the Antarctic Peninsula really looks like since 1958, when seismic surveys were taken across the ice cap.
Hapgood put his theory to the test. He compared the Orontius Phineas map with a map of Antarctica as it looks covered with ice. The maps were similar, but details of the coastline were obscured by the ice. Then, using a map created by seismographic survey, he was able to compare the actual coastlines of Antarctica with the Orontius Phineas map. When the maps were overlaid, the similarities astounded him.